So, lots of times I can find myself sort of assuming that a person outside of myself or a situation outside of myself is responsible for how I feel. But, mindfully watching my feelings, I begin seeing that both the pleasant and the unpleasant emotional feelings don't come from objects that I'm perceiving outside of myself, but from my own mental state, from my attitude. And, we can prove this to ourselves by remembering that when several different people see like the same movie, they have a different set of feelings about it. And that we can stop blaming other people and external events for our sorrows and just begin to look inside where we really have the power to change things. And that's where the Buddha's invitation of, come and see, that if we become familiar with our feelings, we can also then compare our feelings more easily to those of other people. And we can note that just as we develop various kinds of feelings based on circumstances, so do others. And just as my feelings pass away, so do those of others. And the knowledge that we gain from mindfulness about our own feelings, that's called direct insight. And the knowledge that we gain from comparing our experiences with those of others is called inferential understanding. Although there's no way of knowing for sure how others feel, inferential understanding helps us gain, some insight into reality. And we can remember that all living beings have feelings, that they all experience emotional and physical pain and suffer from cold and hunger and feel sad and lonely, and we become less selfish and less inclined to defend our own feelings as right. And we can listen sometimes more patiently to the complaints of pain without complaining, and we can be mindful of other beings that have the same feelings as we do. It makes it a little harder to say something or hurt someone else with our speech. In each moment of the whole cycle of suffering, it's powered by the mind's unenlightened reactions to feelings. And all living beings, without exception, feel, and all unenlightened beings suffer from their reactions to their feelings. Feeling arises from the periphery of the body due to contact with the outside world, and also from deep in the mind due to contact with mental events. And so when we talk about feelings in the context of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, we don't distinguish between physical sensations, like the sun feels warm or the air is cold on my nose. Those feelings are not distinguished from emotional feelings, like I'm feeling sad or I'm feeling exhilarated. Both of those are meanings that of the word that is used interchangeably. And so from the moment our nerve cells begin to develop, we experience feelings. And feeling is present, even for a baby in the womb. When a mother sings, the child knows, and if she's angry, the child will feel the agitation, and if she laughs, the baby will feel that delight. Even if we can't recall these feelings, they've been experienced. And so, every aspect of our lives, struggling, achievements, inventions, work, and even survival, it depends on how we feel. That drive for food and clothing and medicine and shelter and sex and physical comfort, it all depends on feelings. Human beings have discovered and manufactured and developed many things because of feelings. When we feel cold, we seek warmth. When we feel hungry, we look for food. We procreate according to our feelings. Even our thinking sometimes starts with a feeling. We rationalize our emotions, and we have a reaction to a situation. I have every right to be angry about what happened. So when a feeling is pleasing, in our practice, we notice that greed arises and we want more. And when a feeling doesn't please us, then we react with aversion and we reject it. And when a feeling is neutral, we tend to ignore it with a sort of diluted quality of mind. We don't notice it. Greed, hatred, and delusion, or we can just say greed for the short, is the source of all of suffering. Back to number one of the Four Noble Truths. And so mindfulness of feeling is an opportunity to explore this source where we can let go. It's another place where we can let go of suffering. Let's say we're sitting with the intention of watching the rise and fall of the breath, like we might have just been doing. And along with feeling and perception and thoughts and consciousness, here we are for 45 minutes. But after 25 minutes or so, there's this pain that's happening in your back. Or your mind will shift to watching that pain somewhere. And you might notice sometimes that these aches and pains, they quickly go away and when they're watched mindfully. But on some occasions, the pain intensifies. And then we can notice that the mind is resisting the pain. So there's physical pain happening in the body, and then there's what's happening in the mind of resisting the pain. And if we keep still and watch the pain, oftentimes, eventually it peaks and then it breaks up. And when the pain breaks, then if we're still trying to be mindful or manage to be mindful, we'll notice that a pleasant feeling arises. And so we can observe the way the mind hangs on to the pleasant feeling, wanting more of it. And then some other kind of feeling comes up and replaces that. And then there's the pleasant feeling. And as all of these feelings arise and pass away, we can really notice how volatile feelings are. A pleasant feeling might stay pleasant briefly, and then it fades, and then its loss brings this painful feeling, and then painful feeling hurts while it lasts, and then when it's faded, this pleasant sense of relief arises. It really helps me see that when the mind loses interest in feelings, then we go back to the breath. And so we don't really need any kind of special sitting meditation to practice mindfulness of feelings. We carry on with our usual mindfulness meditation and we observe the rising and passing of the feelings the same way we can recognize the rising and passing of the thoughts. And we just practice it in our sitting and in our everyday life. The Buddha described these two broad categories of feelings. There's worldly feeling and there's unworldly feeling. Worldly feelings are the feelings with the underlying tendencies, usually, of greed, hatred, or delusion that's activated to some degree. And these feelings can lead directly into greed and ill will and delusion. Worldly feelings inevitably arise in the pursuits of, our ordinary life, enjoying pleasures, seeking wealth, looking for companionship, seeking a position, or building up recognition and power. The feelings that arise from such activities are always triggered some amount by greed or hatred or delusion. And the Buddha repeatedly warned, particularly his disciples, that worldly pursuits and worldly feelings were dangerous due to these underlying tendencies. And he urged them to become aware of the danger of the underlying tendencies and to let them go. And so with mindfulness, we stop ourselves from getting carried away by greed, hatred, and delusion. And we make an effort to subdue the tendencies by watching them and by paying attention to them with a relaxed mind, not trying to force anything, but simply letting go. The moment that we do this, we can experience these unworldly feelings. The unworldly feelings arise in the pursuit of a spiritual path of liberation. The feelings of the unworldly feelings come from these underlying tendencies that are oftentimes the pursuit for the spiritual path of freedom. And they come with tendencies that sometimes are fully also suppressed or eventually eliminated in that definition of suppressed. So when we transcend a worldly feeling, we're left with an unworldly feeling. So if we let go of something that's greed or ill will or delusion, if we can notice it, there's immediately what's considered an unworldly feeling, or it's more like it answers our pursuit of spiritual path a little more. I see you, Margaret. Hang on a second. Can you hold your thought? Okay. So let's look at pleasant, painful, and neutral aspects of both worldly and unworldly feelings. Worldly, pleasant feelings are very familiar to us. And sense pleasures bring us wealth and pleasant worldly feelings. And, there's this delicious meal that we've had, or some television show or movie, or various things that evoke pleasant worldly feelings. And unless our mindfulness is strong, pleasant sensations of the body and the mind will be worldly because we like these things and we want to experience them more. Unworldly pleasant feelings may be less familiar. Those are the ones that arise whenever we do something that propels us along the path to freedom, to liberation. And we can consider the feelings of like peace and happiness we can get from deep concentration. The pleasant, peaceful feelings that we experience when mindfulness meditation practice is going well. And these are also sort of considered the unworldly feelings. When we use mindfulness to let go of the pleasant feelings, then the feeling that comes from maybe eating tasty food, and sometimes there's a kind of mindfulness that can be enjoyed from the sensual pleasures, but that's not really the Buddha's way. The Buddha taught us to mindfully let go of sense pleasures and enjoy the pleasant, unworldly feelings that come from letting go. And to let go, we remain mindful of the impermanent nature of the sense pleasures. And we remain detached with a kind of detachment that evokes this unworldly, pleasant feelings. And so whenever we let go of some greed or hatred or delusion or something that's a pleasant, unworldly, then the pleasant, unworldly feeling can arise, and we often really don't even see that. So I notice this sometimes when it's just a glimmer of when I'm letting go of something that I'm grasping onto. Even if it's something simple like that coffee cake that I made yesterday morning, and I had a piece last night, and then I had a piece this morning. I'm going to have another piece this afternoon, or maybe I won't. And if I I see that it brings this kind of greed, greedy thoughts to the mind. And as soon as I just let go of, I don't think I'll pursue that right now. It's a worldly grasping onto something that's pleasant, but I think I won't pursue that right now. And there's a relief in the mind that moment of relief from letting go of grasping at something, that's a moment of an unworldly pleasant feeling. And those unworldly pleasant feelings can be noticed, and painful feelings can either be worldly or unworldly. Most of the time we have a lot of aversion, and painful feelings of anger and resentment might arise. But the methods that we discuss for overwhelming anger can help when painful worldly kinds of feelings come up. And unworldly painful feelings can also arise when we're engaged in practicing the Buddha's path. And maybe you've really understood, this actually came up just yesterday in one of my massage clients who was talking to me about his practice. And he was saying that he understood the Buddha's message and he really wanted his mind to be free from greed and hatred and delusion. And, if you've practiced mindfulness and if you observe the precepts and you follow the instructions, and yet you feel that you're not making any progress toward your goal, and the frustrated and painful feeling that we experience in that case is actually an unworldly feeling. Like we can notice, and that's a positive way of turning over that feeling. You don't beat yourself up about it. You actually see that this is an unpainful feeling. I mean, it's a painful feeling, but it's unworldly. And so that's where we have that comparing of worldly and unworldly feelings. So there's also neutral feelings, and they can be categorized as worldly and unworldly. And so, this can go on in terms of, for me, that those kinds of neutral feelings, or they might even be, I'm completely confused by it because there's a sluggishness and this unconcerned feeling that sort of pervades me from moment to moment. So I don't really have highs or lows of pleasant or painful feelings, but the delusion can thrive in this kind of neutral, worldly feeling. So, if we don't know better, when a neutral feeling arises, sometimes we might think, oh, this is not the soul, but I'm touching on spaciousness, and this is how it really feels to be open and free, but its neutral state might really be a deluded state. So I don't want to go on too much longer because our time is up, and I want us to be able to continue to talk to each other a little bit. But just when our mindfulness leads us to recognize that what we call ourself is always changing and subject to impermanence, the feelings that we get of neutral or pleasant or unpleasant can be recognized and not clung to, and it allows us to have a little more depth in our practice. So I think that's all I'll say about it for now.